Right on. All right, Sam, state your name.
Hi, I'm Sam Bucciarelli.
And you have multiple professions. And I have a lot of notes on you, Sam. Came very prepared tonight. But I will let you tell the audience what you do, all the things that you do.
All right. So I would say the primary thing that I do is that I'm the president of the Philadelphia Mycology Club. And so we're a nonprofit centered around um, collecting, studying, and documenting the fungi of Greater Philadelphia, um, building a diverse and equitable community through fungal education, and um, conserving fungi through land stewardship.
Right on.
In addition to my work in the Philadelphia Mycology Club, I just took on a new professional role as a curatorial assistant in the herbarium at the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia. So that's what's actually going on behind me. This is a dried specimen that's like 200 years old from the herbarium.
Wow. Wow. Oh, that is interesting.
Yeah.
That is really interesting. What is it?
Um, it is, I don't remember which plant this is growing on, but this is a rust fungus. This was a particularly beautiful specimen. It has all of these cute little pustules on it. I hope you can see that. Um,
You had me at the
and
name Rust Fungus. That would be a hell of a band name.
oh yeah.
Yeah, rust fungus, right? Um, so you um you are the president of the Philadelphia Mycology Club, and you are doing something very special in August that I attended last year, which is Fungadelphia. And that's what I would like to talk to you about tonight. But first, we're gonna do a little bit of rewinding back to childhood.
Wow.
And yes, so what I would like you to do is take me back to the catalyst that kind of puts you on the path of environmentalism.
Oh, this actually is a really great story.
I know Alice told me to have you tell this story.
So, when I was in first grade in maybe 2002, I was celebrating my very first Earth Day at school. And we spent the whole day like doing these Earth Day activities. We did like a recycling relay race and we planted beans and talked about like the importance of trees for um, what I now know is carbon sequestration, although I'm sure that they didn't explain it that way in when I was a first grader. Um, and like purifying the air and how important all of that is. And so I was suddenly just like super gung-ho about like the environment and taking care of nature and humans as a part of nature. And I came home from school super excited, ready to tell my parents all about this wonderful day that I had. And I saw as soon as I got off the bus that my parents had cut down three big maple trees in our yard on Earth Day.
Wow.
And this was a devastating experience for me at 6 years old. I viewed the trees in my yard at the time as like my friends. I'm from the New Jersey Pinelands. My nearest neighbor was a good like half mile away. And I, at the time, was an only child, so I spent a lot of time just in the yard with the cat, hugging the trees and picking wildflowers and doing all the things that little girls do. So I viewed these trees as being very important to me and suddenly realizing that they were very important to all of us. And I wept for days. at my
Wow.
parents. Yes, I was so upset with them. And I kind of view this as like my like villain origin story. Because that set me on this path of environmental activism and this path of like being a steward for the land and being a voice for nature that, nothing in my life has ever compared to this experience. And I still joke about it with my mom like every Earth Day. And my mom is always like, we had to cut the trees down. Like they were growing roots into the house. Like we were, if they did that, the house was gonna collapse.
Hmm.
And as an adult, like I do understand that that was true and they did need to do that. Um, but like as a little child, I was like, there is nothing that's more important than the trees. And I still believe that a little bit. I actually just talked my landlord out of topping the tr one tree that's in our yard. Um, and we're gonna give it a nice healthy prune instead.
I I find your emotional connection to nature extremely fascinating. Was did just describe to me what it felt like as a kid in your yard with the trees and like kind of like your bond. I'm guessing you played around the trees. Did you talk to the trees? Did you like hug them?
Absolutely.
Did you climb them and spend time in them and everything like that?
I was never much of a tree climber. You might know this about me, but I am like wildly uncoordinated. So, um, I was never much of a tree climber, but I would definitely like hug the trees and like pet them. I loved like touching their bark and collecting leaves in the fall when the fall color was out, pressing them with my mom. I remember doing a lot of that. Um, and being outside in the yard with my pets. We had outdoor cats at that time, which I now know is not a good choice for anybody who is not yet aware of that. Um, but yeah, and the dogs roaming around the yard with me. But between the animals and the plants, that was really like my social interactions for a lot of my time as a kid, especially after I had started school. Prior to starting school, I um spent a lot of time with my cousins, but after I started school, um I kind of like never really fit in. I would say like I didn't have like a really like good true friend until pretty close to middle school. So I really just spent all this time with these plants. They were incredibly special to me, and I knew the differences between the types of trees. I didn't have language for it at that time, but I remember I distinctly remember asking my mom one time, "Why are the pine trees at our house different from the pine trees at grandma's house?" And she said, "They're not." And I now know that they very much are.
Yeah.
They're entirely different species. They're, pretty far as trees in the same genus go. But my mom couldn't really place that, even though I could as a little kid. I always had this sort of intuition for it. My grandma was really into gardening, and so I spent a lot of time with her gardening with like annuals and perennial plants, mostly a lot of flowers. She didn't do a lot of like shrubs or trees. So I did have that experience of connecting with the plants in that sort of way. Um, but it wasn't really until this like Earth Day experience that I was like, so sure that I was gonna be like really committing my life to not just the plants, but to all the beings of planet Earth. And what was really probably the most interesting thing about this whole experience was that my parents had the trees chipped. So they like didn't keep any of the wood. They sent the logs off to wherever the logs go, and they chipped and ground up the stump. And whatever was left, there were these giant wood chip piles. And in these piles came all sorts of mushrooms, little stinkhorns, puffballs, um, some bird's nest fungi, slime molds. And I remember like looking at them and picking them up, and my mom being like, "Don't touch that, that'll kill you." Um, but really feeling this like fascination and sense of wonder about the things that were growing out of these wood chip piles. And not, again, I was 6, so I didn't really have like the words to articulate the things that I was feeling. But looking back, I know that what I was feeling was a sense of, um, like continuation, like the death and the loss of my tree friends became this opportunity for life of another kind to move in and to flourish and to be like playful and interacting with me in the yard in the same way that the trees were. And so this was my very first experience with mushrooms and being interested in biodiversity and what are they doing here. And my first little taste of like the spiritual healing that my relationship with nature and then very specifically with mushrooms would bring me in my adult life. There was a lot of like confusion around that in my teen years, but I came back to it.
I mean, that's incredibly fascinating, and now it makes a whole lot more sense to hear it from your mouth, and how you came to, be on the path of mycology and be interested in, the world's oldest organism, essentially. And so I'll get. I had a bonus question for later, but well, I want to save that question for actually. So, um, after seeing the mushrooms and, seeing like, okay, life kind of finds a way, at what point do you start getting a little bit more interested in finding out about mushrooms? Is it like, later in your childhood, or did it kind of take a back seat, and did it pop up in your teenage years?
I carried my love of nature through my teenage years, but without any sense of like direction or real interest.
Hmm.
Um, there was as we all, you know, experience in our teenage years, there was a lot of like confusion and angst and um depression in my teen years. So I still spent a lot of time outside. My former roommate Kat, she and
Hmm.
I used to go climbing around in these swamps that were behind my parents' house. And we weren't like really doing anything in particular back there except going to the swamps and crossing over them on these logs. And I would fall in like every other day. Um, but she thought that was hilarious, and eventually I'd walk home and change my clothes. So it was without any direction at that time. I didn't really come back to this idea fully until um 2018 when I was processing some really extreme losses of my friends and my partner that were very unexpected and at a very young age. Kevin and Ruth were both only 20 when they passed, both very suddenly within a year of each other. And um, I had a friend, maybe you've met my friend Jones. Um, she came over to my house and was helping me fold my laundry. And we were having a really nice cry together. And she said, Have you have you ever thought about trying magic mushrooms? And I was like, No, should I? And she said, Well, they've been a really healing experience for me, and they just reopened some clinical trials at a couple different universities. They're really promising for people dealing with depression and PTSD, both of which I was suffering greatly from at that time. I definitely didn't have the money to or the time to get into a clinical trial. But you know, I found a way.
Hmm.
And we went on this wonderful camping trip to Cooper's Rock, West Virginia, and we had our mushroom experience there. And at the time, that whole weekend, it was 75 degrees and raining. So perfect mushroom weather. And all over the place were these like candy apple wax caps that were brilliant red, these crazy spiraling sporacis, and um, very notably these glow in the dark jack-o'-lanterns, which were um, like we were in an area where it was actually dark enough to see them glowing all around our campsite.
Hmm.
And so in my in my grief and through this journey that I was on, I came back to that idea of mushrooms being the beautiful things that come out of death, and realizing that it was, even though it was going to be very hard, it was going to be critical for me to pick up my life and carry on. And I couldn't sit in my pit of depression and grief forever. And I returned to my regular life, which suddenly felt very empty. It didn't feel empty before that, but suddenly I was like, what am I doing?
Hmm.
But I was very excited about mushrooms at that time, and I told everybody, I was like, I am obsessed with mushrooms now. I saw so many beautiful ones on my trip. I want to learn everything I can about them. And my mother-in-law sent me a link for a guided walk that was happening in my hometown. So we went and we met uh, this guy, Luke Smithson, who would become my first mentor. And he took us on this guided walk. We were the youngest people there by several decades, me and my partner George. And when we got back with our collections, we were looking through everything and trying to name the different species that we collected. And I held up a specimen and I said, "What is this one's name?" And he said, um, "That's Alexinum. We've been using the European name for it. It needs a new name. It's an undescribed species." And I said, "What? Those are still out there?" And he said, "Oh yeah, anyone could name a new species of mushroom. You could do it." And I said, "I could do it." And I was sold. I started learning more and more, photographing every mushroom I saw in every place I saw them, and posting them to an app, iNaturalist, which uses machine learning and community crowdsourcing to give identifications to different things, and very, very rapidly learning. In 2019, I met my friend Beth, who had just founded the Philadelphia Mycology Club, and she was like, "We're gonna do some walks," and I was like, "I want to help you plan things," and I stepped in as part of the admin team, and I've been doing it ever since.
Have you ever read any Robert Greene books?
No.
The way that you're describing your story and all the events that have taken place sounds like something out of a Robert Greene book, where um, he has this really unique way of telling parts of people's stories, like really important people from history. Um, Hint, hint, you're very important, Sam. So he has this way of describing lesser known stories of very important people from history that were the tiny little sparks that lit their fire and their flame to do something great. And you being BFFs with Alice and me getting to know you slowly over time, I could see that you are doing some great things. I mean, I just going to Fungadelphia last year and seeing how you put that all together and how much fun that was. You're doing great stuff. Um, so you basically, you got you had some really intense life events put you on this path. So naturally, there is a huge fire of passion behind it that people can now understand. And when they come to Fungadelphia, they're going to know that all of this was fueled by all of this passion that you went through to put all of this together, and all of the information that is presented to you there, and all of the cool stuff that is presented to you there. It is like your heart and soul to present all of this to the people that come to Funkadelphia. So, um, let's get into Funkadelphia. What's it like to put that together? Because I was at it last year and I saw how much there was. Like, how long does it take you to put it together? Is it like 6 months? Is it like 3 months? Is it almost a year to kind of like plan it all out, figure it all out? What is it?
Um, so I would say probably closer to 6 months. Um, our organization is fully volunteer run. So I think if I was, you know, doing this full time, running the Philadelphia Mycology Club, it would only take me like maybe 3 months, maybe two, maybe less to put something like this together. But yeah, 6 months is generally my timeline where I start, you know, communicating with my site about like a date for the event, thinking about speakers, communicating to possible community organizations and vendors about the date, sending out save the dates, basically. And um, as it gets closer, we start doing things like fundraising and booking vendors and finalizing our speakers, booking a band, and um, we are now 1 month out from the event,
Mm-hmm.
and um, we have pretty much everything in line. So now it is time to really start with um, advertising for the event, basically. I have to put together, maybe I'll do that right after this call. I'll put together an actual like event page for people to sign up. Um, I'll call Mr. Softy probably tomorrow to say, hey, a month from now, I want you to come to this event
Mm-hmm.
so that people get their ice cream. And uh, then within the next couple weeks, we'll start buying any materials that might be needed. But I don't think we're going to need too many materials this year, luckily. Last year, there was a crazy push towards the end to get together these big trifold boards that we made about different aspects of fungi that we wanted to teach people about. And so that was really intensive, but now they're made and we'll have them until they fall apart and then we'll print them and make them again.
What can what can somebody expect when they attend Funkadelphia?
They can expect to meet a lot of other people with similar interests. They can expect to have fun, I hope, to enjoy really good music, and to learn about all the different aspects of mycology that might be interesting to any one person. So, um, my club is generally interested in biodiversity, but there are lots of different ways that people can be interested in fungi, including culinary, um, Crafting is a big one. Biomaterials. Um, People might be interested in um, the potential me medical benefits of psilocybin. There are lots of different ways that people can be interested in fungi. And so Fungadelphia is a big celebration of that. We try and have a little bit of something for everyone. And by doing that, we can capture different people's interests and also provide a space for people who might be interested in one aspect to be exposed to another in the hopes that they will quit their job and devote their life to mycology.
I mean, I had a great time last year. I was just like, all right. I showed up. I didn't know what to expect, and it was great. And there was a ton of people there. Everybody was really friendly, and yeah, I mean, whoever sees this, I highly encourage coming to Fungadelphia. Um, wait, you said crafting with mushrooms, but
hmm
tell me about that.
Last year we did mushroom stamps. So we took like different sections of mushrooms and coated them in paint and made some art that way. This year
That's
we're
what
also
that
gonna have
was.
yeah.
Okay.
So this year we're also gonna have a natural dyer who will be doing a natural dye workshop and um lots of different fungi and lichens are used for making clothing dye. So I don't know how she's probably more experienced with plants, um, but she might incorporate some fungi as well, and she'll have resources available about how to do that. And I'm really, really excited for that workshop.
What are like what are some everyday steps that somebody could take to kind of just like know more about mushrooms and mycology and how adding some knowledge of mushrooms and mycology to their life could benefit them?
Hmm. One thing that I've really noticed is that my own interest in fungi has um, forced me to be way more active. Um, so this feeling of like going to find mushrooms in the wild pushes me to go on a hike almost every day, which is really good for my body, really good for my brain, and really good for like my emotional health. Being out in nature and feeling connected to everything and everyone around me is really beneficial. And I have noticed that a lot of people who get really hooked on mushrooms are recovering from addiction of some kind. That tends to be one way that people get really interested. And I think part of that is that same feeling of like they need, like we all need something to do every day that is like healthy and good for our brains and our bodies. So that's definitely one way is like just going out and looking at the mushrooms that are around or just really connecting with whatever's around you. Sometimes it's really dry or it's winter and there are no mushrooms, but
Hmm.
um, observing like the trees or the squirrels, um, that's definitely one way that being interested in mushrooms is very good for the mind-body connection. I also think that there are some health benefits to incorporating mushrooms into uh, a a diet for people. They're a decent source of protein. They have some different vitamins that are hard to find in um, in nature otherwise, and so they can be really like healthy for that reason. I actually personally don't eat any mushrooms because I think they're gross. But I encourage anyone who's interested in that to explore that aspect of mycology. And then kind of having like for me, it's almost like a divine inspiration. It's something that if I'm like I really want to sit down and draw, I'm probably drawing mushrooms. And if I'm like, I really don't want to get out of bed today, but what if there's mushrooms outside?
Hmm.
I think that that's kind of the driving factor for me for a lot of things. But I think that all those same ideas can be really good for a lot of people.
Hmm. Yeah, we have
As far
something
as
in
like
common though.
first steps for getting
I was gonna say we have something in common. I don't eat mushrooms either. I tried, doesn't work for me. I tried cooking them.
yeah,
That you just,
yeah,
I'm with you on that. But go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
yeah, I'm just like really not into them. Um, as far as like first steps for getting interested in mushrooms, I think that depends on the person. But if you're interested in looking for wild mushrooms, for whatever reason you might be interested, whether that's biodiversity or culinary or um, medicinal use, um, there are, I would recommend just being observant in nature, taking photos, using the app iNaturalist. And of course, I would recommend joining a local mushroom club and going out on the trails with people who know what they're doing and really hearing about some of the more nuanced aspects of identification that can be really helpful to propel your knowledge in the field going forward.
So I have a question about basically this is because this comes from my own experience in understanding mushrooms, and just the life cycle of mycelium and mushrooms and how everything happens. How how does it affect your perspective of your own life and mortality and like your biological meat suit that you're navigating on this rock spinning through space with mycelium below the surface of everything? Like, how does that make you think about your life?
Um, well, the mushroom life cycle is really different from the life cycle of animals. Um, I mean, we're talking about like really essentially the whole kingdom of fungi. So in the same way that the life of like a fly is so much shorter than the life of like a tortoise or a parrot or a shark or a lobster, um, there are going to be, lots of variations in the life of a fungus. It's estimated that some fungi are 2,000 or more years old, which is so hard for me to wrap my brain around. Even knowing that that's true and knowing the ways in which that is possible for that type of organism, I can't imagine being on this earth for that long. I think I would be tired of it. But they're still kicking, they're still producing mushrooms, they are still, um, releasing their spores out into the world. Fungi and animals evolved from a common ancestor. So we're in like a sister group called Opisthocanta, which means singular posterior flagellum. So this is like a common trait that fungal cells and animal cells share. But there's obviously many, many differences as well between fungi and animals. Um, Kind of separate from that is plants and plants can live thousands of years as well. There are like sea grasses, I think, off the coast of Australia um that were newly named the oldest organism currently living on Earth. So they replaced the humongous fungus in Oregon. This is like, new studies coming out as we like you can develop our understanding of the life cycles of different organisms. We kind of our views might shift of like what's old and what's new. Of course, like an individual mushroom is not going to be 2,000 years old. We're talking about the
Right, right.
mycelial body. Um, and that kind of exists in a space that is outside of our realm of perception for most of the time. That's really crazy for me to think about because it's like it's everywhere and I can't see it. That's whack. And also, but also it's like it's fibrous and interwoven with everything around it, the soil, the trees. Um, it is like using extracellular digestion to break down environmental materials. And it is, thriving despite the fact that I'm not able to perceive it. And I mentioned earlier this like kind of divine inspiration that I have, about mushrooms, but it definitely reminds me of like my Catholic upbringing and like the being indoctrinated with the idea of like just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there, about the idea of God. And mushrooms are like fungi are like sort of like that. Like just because I can't readily perceive it in the environment doesn't mean it's not present or doing an important job. And so it definitely leads to like a lot of questions about like um the existence of everything. But I think that I have made peace with the idea that I'm never going to know those things. And I don't need to, and I don't really even need to try. Um, because I can't. So, I'm really comfortable with like getting to know the spaces that I can perceive in various ways, whether that be, w waiting for the fungus to produce a fruiting body in the form of a mushroom, or doing sampling, taking DNA sequences, looking at things under a microscope. Those are tools that I have to perceive these beings, but I am also content to understand that I don't have to understand them or to know them to believe that their conservation is important and that land conservation is important, keeping green spaces, and natural spaces as pristine as possible in the world that we live in is important, despite the fact that I don't actually know the finer details of what's going on there.
I um we're gonna go down the rabbit hole a little bit, like very deep down the rabbit hole right
Yeah,
now.
let's do it.
Yes. So there's um there's my interests really range everywhere. So I try and look for information in some really strange places that people wouldn't otherwise look for information. And one of those pieces of information is to look to people that have the ability to change their brain waves to kind of be a receiver for intelligences that don't have form, we'll say. Uh,
Hmm.
and like you said, you kind of look at mycelium in the same way. It's like even though you can't see it, it definitely exists. It's there. It's doing its thing. And I kind of look at, there's radio waves, there's all sorts of waves flying around us at all points in the day that we can't pick up. So why wouldn't it be possible for somebody to be able to change their frequency of their brain enough to pick up some of those waves that are in the ether, we'll say. So some people that do this, one of the things that they say a lot uh, revolves around ecology and environmentalism and how we are basically, more or less not taking care of our world the way that we should be. But in time, we will learn what how we've been missing the mark. And one of the things that I think is really interesting is that. Um, Describing kind of like, we'll say, if they have a civilization or if they were part of a civilization, their civilizations are not heavily populated on a planet. It's more so the planet is like the sanctuary, and they live on like ships if they are a race with form or whatever, or if they have transcended form, we'll say. The message is always the same. It's like I think of Earth is like this super overly populated planet with too much shit on it, essentially, and we've kind of wrecked not all of the natural beauty, but a lot of the natural beauty. And I view us kind of like fleas on a dog. Like at any point in time, this planet could go, I'm kind of done with you. And here's a tsunami to wipe that thing out. Here's a volcano to wipe that thing out. And a few thousand years from now, nobody will even know that you were here. If anybody comes here, because I will swallow everything up that has been here and just digest it. But it it it, um it just reminds me all the time that like, yeah, we are living on a bigger living being that is breathing, that has a heartbeat, essentially, and that we're actually not as in control as we think we are with what we're doing here. I think we're getting a little bit like more taps on the shoulder with that, with the way things have been going weather-wise over the last few years as well. So, and saying that, it's important for everybody to realize that the plain fact that yeah, we are human beings um, on this planet with a different with a whole ecosystem, and we're drastically out of balance with it. So, what do you think, knowing what you know about environmentalism, about mycology, about just everything like that, what do you see on the horizon for things that could kind of bring us back into balance? Anything?
That's a really good question. I used to find myself like spiraling about like climate change and disasters and extinction and feeling really like very bleak about that. And I still do. Like I still feel like desperately sad about, like every extinction that I learn about. And they're more frequent than you might think. But and I'm currently in school to get a degree in biodiversity conservation eventually. That'll be the graduate degree. But um I take great comfort in an understanding of past mass extinctions and the way that creates an opportunity for diversification to occur again. And so even though there have been extreme losses in various forms, there has always been um, a restart. And that's very much the same as the idea of like fu fungus being like the rebirth point in um, the loss of an individual life of a tree or an insect or a person. Um, but that same feeling of hope when I see like a decomposer that is a fungus, I have that same feeling when I think about like the uh the Permian Triassic extinction, which is the one that this was like the one of the biggest extinction events ever, called the Great Dying. And
Ooh, the
the
great
way that
dying.
life Yeah, yeah. I'm not a paleontologist, nor am I a paleomycologist. I just, have some cursory knowledge about this subject. But this is, one of the biggest extinctions. And then um after that, lots of life was able to diversify again. So we think about like, the loss of the dinosaurs and the loss of the non-avian dinosaurs, and the way that uh, the few living mammals were able to diversify after that. Insects continued to diversify. They were probably already a very diverse group at that point. Um, and even though there are, these losses of species that we have in the fossil record, there is, life again. There are more branches. And the tree of life just keeps on growing. Like it very much in the way that a living tree does. If you prune a tree back to a bud, the buds that you pruned back to will grow more, basically, and they'll bush out, which is very much what the tree of life does after an extinction event. And knowing that, I find a lot of comfort in the idea that we're now hurtling towards climate disasters and the what a lot of people are calling the sixth great extinction, which is what we're living through right now in the Anthropocene, just the
Wow.
age of humans.
One of the things that I always experience with ingesting mushrooms is like what's the way I can say this? The process or the life cycle that they have with like within myself. Um,
Hmm.
because seeing what they do, like for people that don't understand, like when you see the mushroom come out of the ground, that is the physical manifestation of the mycelium doing what it's supposed to do, essentially. And that's kind of what it does if when you ingest psilocybin mushrooms. From my perspective, it kind of pushes stuff out of you. We'll say for me at least, it's like a purge. Um, Everything that's been floating around in my head, in my subconscious, um, kind of gets cleansed, we'll say. It kind of gets pushed out. And then the what the the same that the fruiting body comes out of the ground or whatever it's decomposing is very much like the physical action I take after that experience and integrating that purge or being cleaned. And that's I think that's what people miss a lot of times with when understanding like what's actually happening when you ingest especially psilocybin. But like uh I take lion's mane twice a day. I take cordyceps when I do certain physical activities. So it's not just, you know, um psilocybin, but what it has what it has kind of whispered to me because I look at it like you are kind of communing with an organism that's been here way longer than you've been here, so it has a lot more information than you do about like your general existence in life, and it can kind of whisper some secrets to you. But everything that you just said about just life cycles in general and like how long they can be, um, and the distance in between big extinction events and stuff like that. These are kind of things that you pick up and are whispered to you when you do commune with psilocybin in this very specific way. I should preface this by saying that I think for me, the way that I've gotten the most from the knowledge of the mycelium is being by myself, taking my sense of sight out of the equation by laying down with eye shades on, very much like they did in the John Hopkins study, and either putting earplugs in or listening to just a frequency um, that's going to be constant, essentially. We could say binaural beat, but I prefer a pure tone. Um, 40 hertz tends to be kind of like my go-to. But when you have that kind of experience, or at least for me, when I've had that kind of experience, it's very much like I'm getting ready to go to school with my humanity and like who I am in the world, who I am walking around on this living organism, and how I'm either in balance or out of balance with it. Because we we tend to get caught up in um, our everyday lives of like paying bills, going to work, being task orientated, and it totally pushes us out of um, understanding that, or I should say, being in the state of mind of walking through the forest and actually like what you are, how you evolved, and this you are the same basic organism that's been here for thousands of years. The only thing that's really changed is technology around you. And we we tend to think like, well, technology will save us. And like I just said, it's like I don't know because there's been these pretty mass extinction events thousands of years apart. And we're starting to see some of that weird shit happen these days. So, just a ramble, I guess you could say. But
I kind of view like the experience of being as like when you have like a ball of clay and you like take a little bit off and you make it into like a, whatever, a little person or a cube. And then you have that cube for a little while and then eventually you're like, and then you put it back in with the ball of clay. Like that is like the experience of being. And then you are the same as the clay just because you're in a different shape. You're just that same clay that's been pinched off and turned into a cube for a little while before you go back to the main ball of clay. And being a person or being a plant or a fungus is very much the same as that.
mm,
Can I blow your mind for a second?
please do.
So, like we've been talking a little bit about life cycles, the life cycle of like an individual fungus. And for the purposes of this conversation, um we're gonna talk about mushroom forming fungi only for this part of this conversation. So mushrooms they start off as a spore, which if anybody listening is not familiar with the spore, it's pretty much analogous to a seed, but it's very, very tiny. And that spore will land somewhere, germinate, begin to produce hyphal cells, which are tiny little thread-like cells um, that perform extracellular digestion, meaning that they spit out enzymes that liquefy their food around them, and then they just like suck it up through a little straw. Um, and the hyphal cells eventually, conglomerate and form a mycelium. And then two myceliums of the same species will find each other and they'll hang out together for a little while and they'll wrap their hyphal threads around each other. They'll go on a few dates. And they'll think like, the conditions are pretty good. There's been a lot of moisture lately. We've got this, nice healthy oak tree here, that's providing us with lots of food. How about we have a baby? And then they produce a mushroom. And the mushroom is not the baby. The mushroom is the sex. So, like, the mushroom is the actual act of sex happening.
Wow.
So, like we're talking about like the interconnectedness of like these life cycles, and I can't I can't think about anything that's like more intimate than consuming the actual act of sex. That is
Wow.
crazy. Yeah, no, yeah, it's crazy. Um, so and
You
then
just
they
blew my
produce
mind, Sam.
yeah, I knew I would. So then they produce the spore and the spore is the baby.
Wow. My perspective is forever changed. Thank you. Thank you so much. Wow, I mean that's beautiful.
Yeah.
That truly
Yeah,
is
it
very
is.
beautiful to think of it that way, to know that now. Because yeah, I always thought like, the fruiting body is like I said, it's the physical manifestation of like what the mycelium does. And I always looked at it like, well, now I'm gonna go out in the world and try and be, you know, the best version of myself that I can be for, everybody around me. But now I know I'm consuming sex from nature.
Well, now you can think about it as like being connected, because that's
Yeah,
ultimately what sex is. So you can think about it as like the opportunity to connect with others. Maybe, not everyone in that exact way, but
right.
um being connected, I think, is like critical to um being interested in mycology. It very much like necessitates connection, whether that be connection with people in the form of like starting or joining a mushroom club, which is more common an experience than you might think. Um, or whether that be like connecting with nature or connecting with yourself in the form of taking mushrooms medicinally, whatever type of connection you're forming that is essential to an interest in mycology.
See, this is why people need to come to Fungadelphia because you'll learn stuff like this. You'll learn that mushrooms are actually really sexy.
And they are.
Yeah, no, they I mean, my perspective is forever changed now. So, and it's better than the one I had. So, um, let's say that Fungadelphia today is yeah, July 22nd. Fungadelphia is Saturday, August 23rd, right?
Yes.
From what time?
Yes.
What time
It'll
does it
be from
start?
11 to 3.
That's right.
11.
And um where is the location? I'm assuming it's the same place it was last year.
Yes, it'll be at the Schuylkill Center for Environmental Education in Upper Roxborough, Philadelphia.
And it is kind of a trek to get down there, which is kind of half the fun too.
Yeah, it is literally the city limit, and last year we ran out of parking. So a lot of people ended up walking from Lincoln High School, which honestly will probably happen again. But it's a nice little hike into the forest. We'll have some reserved spots for anybody who um, needs an accessible spot close to the event. We'll have that available, and um, everyone else can enjoy a little nature walk on the way in. Nothing wrong with that. We're celebrating nature that day.
This year, I'm not gonna ride my motorcycle down there.
Oh, yeah, that might be a good choice. The dirt road is pretty brutal.
Yeah, I was just like, when I rode down there, I was like, oh, this wasn't the best decision on a sport bike.
Oh no, not the sport bike.
Yeah, no, I rode the R1 and I was just like, well, I've ridden through a slush ice fuck storm once. This isn't that, so I'll be fine.
Yeah.
Right on. Well, Sam, thank you so much for coming on tonight and talking about mycology and talking about, the catalyst that lit the fire in you. Um, well, actually, before we close this up, what I would like to, the last thing I'd like to touch on is like, what would you like, with what you're doing right now? How involved you are in mycology and how knowledgeable you are about mycology and everything. What are some things that maybe we could look forward to in the future, or some things that you would like to see happen in terms of the mycology world or the environmental world or anything like that. We need to end on hope.
Yeah.
Because we got very real about extinction and
Oh
destruction,
yeah.
and I would like to end on hope and like what we can do as people to like push hope forward.
I would really like to see the field of soil science develop into um, having applicable land restoration practices. And what I specifically mean by that is being able to target very specific ecotypes in very specific regions, identify the mycorrhizal fungal associates or other soil fungi that should be present, and being able to culture and inoculate them into the area. This is extremely challenging. Nobody is doing this right now. Um, but I think that it would take land restoration efforts to the next level. It would allow for the plant life in restoration sites to thrive so long as the fungi and bacteria, whatever is being sourced for soil science, um, whatever is sourced being matched well to the plant communities that are being restored there. Um, I think that it will be very beneficial. Right now, um, there aren't a lot of organizations that are doing that, or even like there aren't a whole lot of studies coming out about it. There is a movement behind this idea. And I think every time I bring this up, everybody's like, that's a great idea. But I think nobody is in a position right now to really implement anything like that. We're still catching up with understanding what is going on around us. Fungi are worlds behind plants um and animals, and in the terms of like having identified species anywhere in the world. Europe is ahead of most other places with that. Um, but especially like in the Americas, it's uh really we're very behind. And so being able to identify things with the idea of using that knowledge to restore what has been lost due to human activities and being inconsiderate to the environment, um, I think if we were really intentional about it, we could get there. And so that's the main thing that I would like to see happen. Maybe, in my PhD program, if I find the right place, maybe that's something that you'll see from me going forward. Maybe.
If there's anybody that can do it, that can pull it off, I think it's you, Sam.
Thank
I,
you,
tr
Jamie.
I truly do. You are an amazing woman,
Thank
and
you.
you have lived a really interesting existence thus far. And you're only 30,
I'm 20. I'm gonna be
20,
29.
you're 29. You're going to be 29. Wow, what you're going to do over the next just 10 years of your life probably is going to be pretty amazing. So I am rooting for you, Sam,
Thank you.
truly. Um, so, like I was saying, thank you for educating me more about mycology. And um, I am going to help you as much as I can promote Fungadelphia because I thought it was really cool. And any parting words before we close up?
Join the Philadelphia Mycology Club. You can do that on our website, phillymycoclub.com.
Right on. All right. Huh. I am going to close it up and stop recording.
All right.